Pay attention to this footage. It's grainy. The resolution is poor. This is raw material from a trail camera, mounted deep within the rugged Pisgah National Forest, North Carolina. This area, known locally as the Narrows, is hostile terrain. No official trails, limited access. The kind of place hikers avoid and hunters whisper about. The date registers November 12th. The camera was positioned to capture wildlife patterns, deer, maybe black bear. But its motion sensor was triggered by something else, a human figure. A woman, around 35 years old, appears in the frame from the left side. She is wearing soiled, ill-fitting, oversized clothing. Her movements are mechanical, confused, her gait unsteady as she navigates the heavy undergrowth. She walks straight through the frame without pause, without looking back, and disappears into the darkness. The hunter who owned the camera checked the footage 3 days later. He recognized her immediately. Not from recent memory, not from the news, from a fading flyer pinned to the bulletin board at the ranger station. Lena Moretti. She vanished from a local campground in August 2021. The official ruling was swift and simple. Accidental death due to exposure. Case closed. No body recovered. But the discovery of this footage, 3 years later, tore open a wound the police thought they had sealed shut. Dead women do not walk through the Narrows. And a woman surviving 3 brutal winters in that hostile environment, with no shelter, no supplies, no support, she would be unrecognizable, skeletal, feral, not walking calmly through the frame. Someone had kept her alive. Detective Mark Hatcher, the original lead investigator on Lena's disappearance, was pulled back into the case. He had closed it himself in 2021, convinced she had wandered off trail and succumbed to the elements. The Narrows had claimed lives before, but this footage changed everything. Hatcher knew immediately. If Lena was alive, she wasn't surviving alone. He started with the basics. Lena Moretti had been 32 when she vanished. No criminal record. No history of mental illness documented in medical records. She worked remotely as a graphic designer, lived modestly, kept to herself. Her only close relationship was with her older brother, Caleb Moretti, who had raised her after their parents died in a car accident when Lena was 12. Caleb had been the one to report her missing. He told police she had gone camping alone to clear her head after a difficult breakup. He seemed devastated during the initial search, cooperative, distraught. He joined the search parties himself, spending days in the forest calling her name. The search was thorough. Volunteers combed hundreds of acres. Helicopters swept the canopy. Cadaver dogs found nothing. After 6 weeks, the case went cold. Hatcher had no choice but to close it. But now, staring at the grainy footage on his laptop screen, Hatcher realized he had missed something critical. The jacket swallowed her frame. These weren't her clothes. Someone had supplied them. Someone nearby. She wasn't lost. She was being maintained. Hatcher made a decision. He restarted the investigation quietly, without alerting the media. He couldn't afford a circus. He needed control. He returned to the Narrows with a small team, focusing on a 5-mile radius around the trail camera's location. They weren't looking for a campsite. They were looking for a structure. After 4 tense days of searching, cutting through dense underbrush and navigating treacherous slopes, they found it. Not a futuristic bunker, not a cabin. A dilapidated root cellar built into a muddy hillside from a forgotten homestead that hadn't appeared on maps since the 1940s. The entrance was half concealed by rotting timber and overgrown vines. But the key detail stopped Hatcher cold. A heavy, rusty padlock securing the door. The lock was on the outside. This wasn't a shelter. This was a prison. But here's where it gets stranger. There were no signs of forced entry, no scratches on the wood, no evidence of struggle. The ground around the entrance was undisturbed except for a single oversized shoe print. The imprint matched the footwear Lena was wearing in the footage. They led into the cellar, not away from it. She had walked in willingly. Hatcher ordered the lock cut. His team moved carefully, weapons drawn, unsure what they would find inside. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air that escaped was stale, thick with the smell of earth and something else. Something human. They found Lena at the bottom, huddled in the corner of a small dirt-walled chamber, lit by a single battery-powered lantern. She was alive, malnourished but alive. And then came the first true shock. She didn't seek rescue. She didn't run toward them with relief. She scrambled backward, screaming, her voice raw and panicked. "I didn't do it! I won't go to the chair!" She was convinced the police were there to execute her for a murder. Hatcher froze. He holstered his weapon slowly, raising his hands. "Lena, you're safe. We're here to help you. You're not under arrest." But she wasn't listening. She kept screaming, pleading, insisting she was innocent, that it was an accident, that she couldn't go to prison. Hatcher secured the scene and called for medical support. While they waited, he searched the cellar. What he found explained everything, and nothing. A stack of old newspapers, carefully arranged on a makeshift shelf. But these weren't normal papers. Someone had taken real newspapers from 2021 and crudely pasted fake headlines over the actual news. The fabricated stories proclaimed that Lena Moretti was a wanted murderer, accused of killing her ex-boyfriend in a violent rage. The headlines claimed she was being hunted by state and federal authorities. There were even fake mugshots, poorly photoshopped, showing Lena's face with a prisoner number. The prison wasn't physical, it was a lie. Someone had convinced Lena she was a fugitive, that the outside world was hunting her, that the only way to survive was to hide. And she had believed it for 3 years. Hatcher knew immediately who had built this prison. The interrogation of Caleb Moretti began within hours. He was calm, composed, almost eerily prepared. He admitted to knowing about the cellar. He admitted to bringing Lena supplies, food, water, clothing. But he denied any wrongdoing. His story was meticulous. Caleb claimed Lena had suffered from severe paranoid delusions for years, delusions that predated her disappearance. He said she had become convinced, without any basis in reality, that she had committed a terrible crime during a dissociative episode. She believed the police were coming for her. She begged him to hide her, to protect her from arrest. Caleb produced an affidavit, notarized and dated 6 months before Lena's disappearance, in which Lena allegedly requested that Caleb help her disappear if her mental state deteriorated. The document seemed legitimate. The signature matched. Caleb's lawyer argued that he was simply honoring his sister's wishes, acting as her protector in a tragic situation beyond his control. It was a perfect defense, twisted but legally airtight. Hatcher pushed harder. "You fabricated newspapers. You convinced her she was a murderer. That's not protection, that's psychological torture." Caleb's expression didn't change. "I didn't fabricate anything. Lena created those herself. She was paranoid, detective. She needed to believe the threat was real, or she would have tried to leave. I was keeping her safe from herself. The legal system bought it. The DA reviewed the case and found insufficient evidence to charge Caleb with kidnapping or false imprisonment. Lena had entered the cellar willingly. She had stayed willingly. And now, suffering from severe dissociation and trauma, she refused to cooperate with investigators. She clung to the delusion that she was a killer, that Caleb had saved her, that the outside world was her enemy. Hatcher filed for an emergency protective order, trying to separate Lena from Caleb's influence. But the system moved slowly. Too slowly. On the night of December 5th, Caleb Moretti entered the hospital where Lena was being treated. He was disguised in scrubs, carrying a forged transfer order. Security footage shows him speaking to Lena briefly before she stood and walked out with him willingly. She believed he was taking her to a safer place, away from the impending arrest. By the time the alarm was raised, they were gone. The manhunt was immediate and intense. Hatcher traced Caleb's last known phone activity to the steepest, most remote section of the Narrows, a ridge known for its unstable, rain-saturated soil. It had been raining heavily for 3 days. The ground was treacherous. Hatcher found Caleb alone, standing near the ridge, muddy and distraught. "Where is she, Caleb?" Caleb pointed vaguely toward the cliff face, his voice shaking. He claimed Lena had heard the distant sirens of the search vehicles. She panicked, convinced the police had finally found her. She ran toward the ridge, screaming that she had to disappear forever, that she couldn't let them take her alive. Caleb said he tried to stop her, but the rain-soaked earth gave way beneath her feet before he could reach her. The official search found Lena's body the next morning. She was recovered from the bottom of the ravine, buried under a landslide of mud and rock debris. The medical examiner ruled it quickly: accidental death due to environmental factors, blunt force trauma consistent with a fall. No signs of foul play. Caleb Moretti faced only minor charges related to aiding an escape from medical custody. He received probation. The system accepted the narrative of the devoted brother who tried, and tragically failed, to save his paranoid sister from herself. Lena Moretti survived 3 years of psychological imprisonment, only to die hours after her rescue, running from a lie she could never escape. The world moved on. The case was closed. But Detective Hatcher couldn't let it go. He visited the ridge one last time, alone, in the early morning mist. The soil was unstable, yes. The rain had made the slope treacherous. But Hatcher noticed something the forensics team had missed: a small, distinct abrasion on the stone wall near the top of the ridge. The mark was too high and too specific to be caused by a random slide. It was the impression of a heavy, robust shoe print, the kind of footwear Lena wore, pushed hard against the rock at the very last moment. Not a slip, not a fall, a push. The heavy rains had provided the perfect cover. The natural disaster only required a final small push to accelerate the inevitable. And Caleb had been there, alone with Lena, at the exact moment the ground gave way. Hatcher knew the truth, but he had no proof, no witnesses, no confession. The investigation was officially closed, but the lack of justice became Hatcher's obsession. He kept the case file on his desk. He reviewed the footage every night. The image of Lena walking through the frame, trapped in a lie, haunted him. Was Lena's last, desperate movement an attempt to save herself from the fall? Or was it the final, futile resistance against the person who had brought her to the edge? The evidence suggests that Caleb Moretti achieved what he wanted: complete and absolute control over his sister's reality, her movements, her thoughts, and, ultimately, her silence. All under the perfect cover of a tragic accident. Lena Moretti spent her last moments running from a lie, straight into a final, undeniable truth. And the man who created that lie walked free.